In this Rise of Kingdoms video, I'm going to show you why I'm using a Relic Mulan instead of so many of these other expertised legendary commanders that are at my disposal when I fight in KVK in my 5-March Murder Ball. We went and we did some testing to prove that a Mulan secondary was better than Ethelfled, better than Herald, better than just bringing another high damage march. So stick around in this video for the proof as to whether or not you should use and Relic Mulan. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and in this video, sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms, I want to talk about this Mulan relic, which I found to be extremely good. In fact, the test results, which I'll give to you in just a moment, will prove to you that by increasing the health of her troops by 10% and reducing the skill damage taken, she is now a top contender, and I think is a very worthy commander for an open field murder ball in KVK especially. So in this video, I will try to help answer the question for you: should you relic and use Mulan? Now, I'm going to start this video by sharing the results with you, and then I'll talk about the methodology and show you exactly how we arrived at these conclusions. We really wanted to know two things when we made this video. The first is, should you use a Mulan secondary when you're battling with Trajan or some other commander? Now, in this video, we tested Trajan primary, and then a bunch of different secondaries. We ran a Mulan secondary, we ran an Ethelfled secondary, we ran a Herald secondary, because Trajan Herald is also pretty strong. And then we even compared fighting with just like, what if you just brought another high damage march instead of this Trajan stuff, you know? Like, get rid of Trajan, Mulan, get all that, just bring a damage march. And the result was Trajan Mulan winner across the board. When I say across the board, I mean that we also ran yet another style of test. What if, instead of focusing the highest damage march first, the enemy attacks your Trajan first? In this case, Trajan Mulan, but also we ran Trajan Ethel, Trajan Herald, and the winner was once again Trajan Mulan. So whether or not the Trajan Mulan was getting focused, it was the better march to bring in the open field, and that is why when I've been battling in this KVK, I have been using Trajan Mulan as one of my 5 marches. Because even though the Trajan Mulan reports are going to look bad, all of the other reports are actually going to be so much better that it's worth it. And you may be wondering, well, Chisgule, how much better? Again, I promised you the results up front, and so here they are. We only ran a small number of trials for each combo, 2 or 3. Arguably, you could run more trials to get more data. And instead of countering the total number of Sev wounds in a big 5v5 tussle, I'll explain the methodology a little more in a second here, I'm just going to give you the average number of units remaining at the end of a 5v5 duel to the death, okay? I battled against Cortex and we fought to the death here. When I used Trajan Mulan, I had an average of 350,000 units remaining. When we used Ethelfled secondary or Herald secondary to that Trajan, we had about 210,000 average units remaining. And when we brought in an extra high damage march, granted, I had not as good accessories on that march, but the rest of my equipment was still really strong. I had about 180,000 units remaining on average. Again, sample size is very small, like 2 to 3 to be saying average, but like we're working with the data we have, and that's the data we have, and this already took a long time to make this video. And I want to share with you the results for when the Trajan got focused first. Because again, Mulan was the winner, and not by a little, by a lot. In the situation where Trajan and Mulan get focused first, Mulan had 430,000 units remaining. We only did this trial once for what it's worth, so it's not an average. It's just one time we ran it. The Trajan Ethel combo, when it got focused, we had 367,000 units remaining. And when we ran the Trajan Herald combo, which I thought was going to be amazing, it had only 300,000 units remaining. It was the worst performing of them all. And the Mulan combo was just like a lot. I mean, that's a lot better. 430,000 units remaining compared to 300,000 units remaining is actually a big deal. So what the heck is going on that Mulan is actually this good? Because I'm making the argument that she is, based off of the testing that we went and we did, and we as me and Cortex, because we wanted to know before this pass opened, what should we be fighting with? So the thing about Mulan, man, is that she's going to buff 5 marches, including, well, 4 plus herself, because she prioritizes your marches over enemy marches, at least the last time that I ran a test to try to prove how that buffing prioritization would work. So your marches are going to be getting 20% attack, defense, and health for 3 seconds, plus march speed. Now, this testing didn't even really showcase how good the march speed is, which it's amazing for making escapes in KVK. But just getting all those stats on your marches offsets the fact that she's not really doing much damage. But even though she doesn't do damage, she does make the target take 20% more damage for 3 seconds after her active skill is used. That also is kind of a big deal, because when you're pairing with Trajan, you know you're going to be generating a lot of rage. You're going to fire off your skills pretty quickly, especially if you put something like a Horn of Fury or anything else on this march that'll make sure you fire off your skills first. That all damage boost is really powerful, and it does stack with Trajan's all damage boost, by the way. So there's one turn where you're doing 40% extra damage to the target, which is just disgusting. And the reason Mulan does well when she's focused is that she reduces her damage taken by 5%, and she starts to punish the attackers every 5 seconds or so. She will have a chance, anyways, of reducing the rage of the target, that's hitting her, which is a big deal. So this can trigger once every 5 seconds, but there is a 20% chance of it triggering. And if you've got 5 marches hitting you, I mean, that should trigger pretty much almost immediately after the sort of internal cooldown here wears off. So that's part of the reason why focusing Mulan actually kind of sucks. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Mulan is the right march to bring to the murder ball. But let me explain the methodology and then I'll show it to you, okay? What we did was a 5v5 battle to the death. And then we just count the troops remaining at the end of the battle. We did this in Ark of Osiris. We did full equipment. We did, I think, a 5% token. We said, hey, use whatever city skin you want. It doesn't matter. This isn't about whether or not I win or Cortex wins. This is about comparing the relative result of the different combinations, which combo worked out the best. So we tried to have the exact same kill order every single time that we sort of ran through it. Cortex had a kill order, I had a kill order, focusing on the highest damage marches first. And I will say there is maybe a flaw with this testing, which is maybe if you look at the Sev wounds, certain commander combos inflict a lot more Sev wounds. Typically, like Attila Takeda does like a shocking amount of Sev wounds, but we weren't using Attila Takeda because I don't think that's the right march to bring to a murder ball anyways. So let's jump into the footage and start to review. Okay, up first is going to be the Trajan and Mulan combo. I'm just going to show you one battle, a sampling of each, just so that we can look at this all together and talk about some of these results. Every single time I targeted the Honda with Tommy because that Tommy debuff is absolutely disgusting, so I had to try to knock that off the board. Then I go and I target the E-Song. He's using E-Song Relic Mehmed, which is a very strong march. He's even using that in KVK, and like, he's been very happy with it. Then I believe I target his XY. Now, it's possible I should have just targeted his XY first, or second even, but I just felt like getting the E-Song Mehmed off the board was important, and the Tommy cannot stay on the board. That thing is a disaster to leave around. So after the XY, then I go and I focus down his Gilga Nebu. I mean, these are great combos, right? They're all geared up. And the last thing I do is I focus out the Guan, because he's got Guan Leo. So do I, by the way. And Guan Leo, man, if you focus that first, it's such a mistake. It's such a mistake because it gets that expertise skill, giving it a lot of tankiness for 10 seconds. And that is 10 seconds you can't afford. Here you can see the troop count of the troops that I have remaining. I mean, I got 4 marches left, man. This is a healthy result. And I believe at this moment in time, we were having well, I was laughing pretty hysterically about how much I had won by. Anyways, second fight. Here is an Ethelfled secondary to Trajan. By the way, in case you're wondering what I'm using here, this is not the murder ball I ended up using in the open field. However, I've got XY with Nevsky, which is pretty solid. I've got my Trajan combo. I've got Guan with Leo. I've got Neb with E-Song. And I've got Artemisia with Amanatori. I've mentioned this in a number of videos, but the reason that I use Artemisia primary is because I often end up garrisoning, and I don't want to keep changing my talent build. So I think the Amonatori is actually better in the open field, but I've got a open field build on my Artemisia and then a garrison build on the Amonatori, because that's the more important thing to be doing with her, is getting like really good results when I'm garrisoning something. So this result you can already see. It's just like, I mean, you can just see it. It's not nearly as good using the Ethelfled. And a part of this could be like the sort of angle of attack and how things are lining up, which is we tried to run multiple trials. But one of the advantages of Mulan is that she does not care where your marches are located. For the same reason Yi-Song is good. The ability to buff your marches regardless of like where they are physically, as long as they're sort of within a circle of Mulan, is really good. Whereas Ethelfled has to have marches in front of her. And even though I would say Ethelfled is still probably the meta for bringing to like Ark of Osiris, because everybody is just stacked on top of each other in the mid-fight, you're going to hit 5 targets every single time. In most open field combat in KVK, I will make the argument that with Ethel, you're not going to hit 5 targets most of the time. Here's the third test, by the way. Now we've got Trajan with Herald. I really like Trajan Herald for a number of reasons. First of all, the 4th skill on Herald, Stamford Bridge, triggers anything that would count as an active skill. So that includes, for example, the talents that would give Trajan 20% more defense, which is kind of cool, right? So I think that's like really great synergy. And I've always felt like the tankiness of the Trajan offsets the lack of tankiness of the Herald, and Herald's like all this damage boost does really well. My targeting there is a little bit slower than I'd like, but I don't think that actually is going to change the end result too much, although it does make it slightly worse. For the most part, I was pretty good about exactly timing when a march was dying to go and target something else. So there's definitely, obviously, room for a little bit of human error here as we go and we do this. Don't mind the fighting that's going off to the side, a little bit of other murder ball testing going on over there. But, I mean, I don't think that slight mistake I made, like with the targeting in there, is the reason that this result is as bad as it is. I mean, I think the reality is that Trajan Herald is not doing enough, shockingly, to cover for your other marches when they're getting focused down. And my murder ball philosophy has always been that each of your marches needs to be either doing enough damage or enough protection to match what your other marches are doing. This is why I don't like having one tanky march among many high damage marches. The sort of Trajan with Herald is not doing enough to protect the other marches. The extra damage of the Herald is not enough to offset what's happening to the other marches, especially compared to how much Mulan is doing. And I'll just emphasize for a moment, by the way, here I brought in Gilga Ram as my 5th damage march. I know Gilga Ram is not like the best high damage march. In fact, I want to rerun this test when I have a Honda and Tommy and compare, like, if I ran 5 damage marches, but this time I've got Honda Tommy, like, how does that compare? I think that would be very interesting to see the result, and hopefully I'll be maxing Honda soon-ish to be able to show something like that. So by no means is this perfect, right? There could be another high damage march that would be a really good contender as a replacement for that Trajan. But based on this result, which you're kind of watching now, like I didn't find that. And, you know, maybe, in fact, am I using Gilga? No, I'm using Gilga Tommy. I kind of swore I was using Gilga Ram, but apparently I'm using Gilga Tommy, which I actually think is probably a better choice. Like, the skill damage debuff is really good. Man, I might have to edit that in earlier in the video. So every time I say Ramses, I'll say Tommy, rip. But, I mean, you can see it's just not nearly as good. In fact, I think we were uncertain at one point as to whether or not I would even win. So it was way worse not having the Trajan. Like, way worse. And my best guess here is that, look, like, I've got 3 really good sets of gear, like one best set for each troop type, and giving those best commanders in the game, plus my best gear sets, even more Mulan buffs on top, 60% of stats, it's just overwhelming. Plus, I think that all damage taken for the 3 seconds is better than meets the eye. Now I want to show you the results where we're actually focusing the Trajan first. So this is the result where we focus the Trajan Mulan. You can see all these marches fan out here. And, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's something going on with, like, the positioning of the marches that makes the result better. And we only ran this trial once. So this is the only time we ran the Focus Trajan first test. But the Trajan Mulan did really well. And then we sort of switch things up and we go target by target here. And the problem is that because these marches all do so much damage, you can't ignore them, man. Like, ignoring them lets them do way too much damage to you. So the Trajan plus Mulan is actually one of the weaker marches in my lineup. And we know this because if they focus the Trajan Mulan first, I actually get a better outcome on average than when they focus one of my high damage marches. So this is why we know, I think, that like Trajan Mulan is kind of on the bubble maybe for being like the right one to include. But I just want to add for a moment that it felt very, I guess, comforting in KVK, knowing that if they focus one of my marches, like, guess what, man? I've got, what is it, 40% of extra defensive stats, right? Like 20% defense, 20% health for 3 seconds. Plus, by the way, in my KVK murder ball, I also was using William, and William is going to go and give me 20% more defense as well. So we're looking at 40% more defense and 20% more health on all my marches. So whatever you focus, good luck to you, because I'm going to be really tanky. And that's not to say you can't wipe out my marches. Man, you most certainly can. But I felt a lot more comfortable tanking for the team, knowing that I was pumping those marches with so many defensive stats to be able to actually hang. So here, I mean, this result is going to be pretty good. This is the Ethel secondary to the Trajan. My Trajan popped at that point, and he's focusing on my XY Nevsky, which I think is a very good choice. Also, another little tussle going on just north of our position here. Now I'm focusing his XY. He's got Gilga with, let me check this again. That's right, Nebu secondary here. I mean, it's tempting to actually go for that march sooner than I did. I mean, he's just got a lot of threats. This is the whole point of the sort of must answer threat philosophy to a murder ball. You want every threat to be kind of like, that's pretty bad. How do I deal with that? So here's the troops remaining in just a second from this fight. You can see, even though Guan is silencing, and it sucks that he's doing that, I can't just focus down Guan because it's going to just live too long. Okay, here we are for the final matchup. Trajan with Harold. And I thought, man, this was going to be the best one. I was so hyped for this. I really was so hyped for Trajan Harold to just blow this out of the water, and for my recommendation to be that you should use Trajan Harold if you think you might get focused. But that can't be my recommendation, because watch what happens next year to the rest of this fight. I don't do particularly well. And when I added up all the sevs, and okay, one thing I will say that could be a part of that is that I did need to relocate slightly in the middle of that fight. Maybe that was related to the physical position of the marches. But now I'm located behind them. I'm not even taking as much AoE. So I don't know if that's necessarily what's going on. Watch how much damage this Guan is just going to crank out here, especially when he gets down to 10%. I've got pretty solid positioning from an AoE standpoint. Like, I don't think it gets much better than this. And now we work on this Guan. Guan drops down to 10%. He gets ultra tanky. And he still lives for a little while here before finally he pops. And, I mean, he did a good amount of damage. There you go. I mean, maybe there's an argument that I should just be focusing the Guan first anyways, but let's jump back in game. Obviously, there are some flaws with the testing, and the methodology is not perfect, and the sample size is too small, but I'm pretty convinced, and I had a good experience using Trajan with Mulan in my murder ball. You could make the argument that if you weren't convinced or you had better commanders, that, you know what, maybe you just go and you use a high damage march, and at some point, if you go to 6 marches, you could bring in Mulan. But a lot of people will never get that far, which brings me to a question of, what if you can't actually max Mulan? Should you still use her? And in that case, I think that if you got her to a 5-5-1-5, all with your gold keys, that you could consider it. Would I go out of my way to put universals into Mulan? I actually would say probably not. There's so many good commander options, I would just stick to those. And if you're not bringing 5 marches, I don't think that Trajan Mulan makes the most sense. I do think, however, that if you've got a 5-5-1-1 Mulan, that you should probably just use Ethelflaed instead. And although that's not what I tested, I think that the extra second of buff durability is actually massive for what you're getting from this commander. And if you're missing this skill right over here, I don't know, anything less than an expertise Mulan, I actually think you've got an expertise Ethel. Probably just stick to that, unless you've got Ethel deployed somewhere else and you're looking for a way to get like yet another sort of march assembled. Then you might consider like, okay, the 5-5-1-5 Mulan, maybe. But given how well the Ethel performed, you know, honestly, like, I think the Ethel is probably fine compared to an unmaxed Mulan. But maybe we'll figure out a way to test an unmaxed Mulan compared to a max Mulan. There might not be an easy way to do that. If you like this video, throw a like on here and consider subscribing. This style of video takes a lot longer to put together, like a lot longer. So I appreciate the support. And until next time, you have fun smashing your enemies and leave a comment down below with your thoughts. Mulan secondary, man. Worth it? Not worth it? What should we test next?